Oh, I'm so excited about this, guys. Hello, everybody. This is
Hey.
just such a brilliant
Hello.
time for us
Hi.
to be checking in. It's been a really kind, it's been an extraordinary time in terms of it being so tense and weird and divisive online. We've seen a lot of fallouts. You've seen a lot of sort of quite shocking statements from friends. I've actually had some family that have been saying some weird things, and I thought it would just be a really good time for us to check in with each other and have a bit of a chat and an open, honest chat of people who, you know, work in an industry where I don't, it feels, obviously there are times where you go, actually that was a bit odd, but as I've grown up and we've all grown up doing it, it sort of felt like we are one. But then we have these times where it rocks us. I thought we'd bring together some really incredibly talented people and interesting people. I've got actress, singer, and voiceover artist Jennifer Siam.
Hello.
I've got actress and writer Donna Preston. I've got actress and presenter Sarah Jane Honeywell. I've got actor singer Adrian Hansel, and I've got director and filmmaker, and we were obsessed with him as Jerome from Brookside.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was great.
Really?
So what it was as well, it was to talk about. We've all been quite active online as friends. We've all been really posting, getting involved, and like a lot of your posts have moved me, or I thought, or we've like me and Sarah Jane had this amazing interaction after the post that I posted, and I'm going to read it out to you. It seemed to get quite a lot of traction, a lot of shares, and I wasn't upset when I was saying about this experience. It was just my everyday experience, and I'm so hardened to it. So I'll read it out to you. It says, I remember being, this is after obviously George Floyd and the Amy Cooper incident in the park that happened. And I wrote, I remember being stopped in LA on my way to the shop. The officer asked me, "Are you on probation?" I remember feeling humiliated. Now I would think it was normal as I've hardened to racism. When people put their mobile phones away with suspicion when they see me, or when people quickly check their bag when you walk into a pub, or put it right next to them to check that it's right there, or women clutch their bags at the glance of a black person. All of these little, in brackets, massive things used to hurt. Now I expect it. What a bloody shame. I try and stay positive and work friendly on here, but by staying quiet, I am part of the problem. Hashtag I can't breathe. Which, and then I had like a cry out from friends, like, one sort of dodging, "I'm really sorry that you feel this way." And it's like, oh God, that's a bit odd. But the most amazing thing that I had was with Sarah Jane. And it was like, and, and we've had a great time together in the past. And she was like, oh, she sort of went, oh, I've done that. I've actually been that person. And now we had an amazing conversation, and I really loved you for your honesty. And I just think it's a what was Sarah, what is it when that happens?
I,
What and not to put you on the spot, and you are not the voice of all white people
that's
here.
all right.
Or
I
yeah,
I didn't know I did it until I read your post. I thought, like, I mean, I was sacked from the BBC for sticking up for animals, so I thought I was the most empathetic person in the world, and I really thought I absolutely wasn't racist. You know, I would fight vigilantly people that were. And then I read that post. Obviously, I saw what happened, and I was shocked, and I thought that's terrible. I can't believe that still happens in this day and age. And then I read your post, and I went, oh my God, I, I do that. I definitely do that. I definitely do that to young black men. And if I'm in the pub, I'll pull my bag closer. If my phone's out on the table, I'll put my phone away. And I didn't even realize I did it. And I felt like I needed to own up to you, because I feel like if people don't own up to the fact that they're doing even small things, and they're not small actually because they hurt people deeply, and but if they don't own up to the fact that they're doing that, then how can things ever change? And how, if they don't own up to other people, they're not owning up to themselves, are they? And we can all go around saying, I'm not racist and I don't do that and this is terrible. Meanwhile, pulling your bag in a bit closer in the pub, nothing's going to change. And I really think that if there was ever a hashtag for white people, it should be I'm listening at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, it's not just white people that do it. Black people do it as well. You know, I've clocked myself doing it. So we have to. It's about that. And thank you for being so honest. Like like Leon, what do you think it is?
Well, you know me, I feel like I've got an answer for everything. But over the last few weeks, pre-corona and corona, I've just been analysing everything and just watching so many documentaries, like I'm the biggest, people just call me conspiracy theorist, but even if a small percentage of some of the things that I watch are true, then it's worth looking into. So all of the stuff that I've seen, where we've got to think, where do these come from? Everything's learned. We learn everything. We learn things from school. We learn things from home. But ultimately, what is the biggest tool that governments, that media, anybody uses to teach us? And it's television, it's film, it's movies. We are taught how to perceive a black person, how to perceive a Muslim person, how to perceive a white person, how to perceive a Chinese person from what we see on television. Because some people, and it doesn't matter what your race is, live in isolated communities where all they've got for their education is the news. So if you look, slightly on a tangent, but if you look back to years before, 10 o'clock news always used to end with a happy story, a positive one to take you out on, happy news, so that you're not left with all the doom and gloom. That's gone. It's gone. Now it's constant bombarding with this has happened, that's happened, this person's died, cancer, death, war. So we're ingrained with all this stuff of actually the world is bad. And then we turn on to our television programs and it's like, oh, the black person is the convict, or he's a bouncer, or he's a drug dealer, or he's a kid on the street. And we go, oh, well, that's just what black people do. No, that's what we're taught black people do. That amazing documentary, which I only watched recently, which I feel ashamed for, The 13th, where it talks about one of the earliest Hollywood blockbusters, The Birth of a Nation, depicted black people as animals, eating kind of off the bone and raping white women. So instantly you've got something that's going to be gone on a global scale before television was even around, before film was even on a, on an everyday kind of basis. But this is an education tool that people use to show that black people are thugs, that they're evil, that the murderers, the rapists, and that has been perpetuated and used throughout time. So all of our experiences are, people go, Muslim people, they're hired to do, on TV, we'll hire a Muslim person to play a terrorist, or, we'll hire an Indian person to work in a shop, or to be a doctor, all these stereotypical roles that we're told that that's what people do. So if we are told on television that that's what a person does, when we see them on the street, we're going to think that's what they are.
Yeah, I think actually it was really interesting in terms of our industry as well, because a bit before lockdown, I was going up to Kensington and Chelsea to get my parking permit done, and there was this really pretty blonde woman. And I looked at her and then I did a double take and I was like, oh, she's off the telly. And in the process of me doing that, she glared at me, looked away, and then hid her phone and clutched her bag. So there was that. Then a few days later, I was walking with the morning coffee, as you do, and actor that I really respect, actually. And he was a few streets away from where I live, and it was only me and him on the street, and he was walking towards me. And he was scrolling on his phone, and I was like, oh, that's so-and-so, because he was doing a play about race at the time. And I looked, and he looked at me, and he got his phone, and he put it in his pocket. So it's so ingrained in society that this, and isn't it amazing that, like, in London, where you think, actually, come on, if I've got a phone in my hand, and I've got a coffee in my hand, I'm not going to drop it to rob you. It's like, are we going, you know what I mean?
But do you know what I think the thing is? It's the fact that it's become so subconscious. It's so ingrained in our subconscious from a kid. Like one of my best friends who I'm actually staying with in Leeds whilst I'm working up here is a white guy in his 50s. And this has been the best journey for me, going through all of this with him, actually seeing him, not that, he'd never class himself as a racist. He's not a racist person. But he got an old book. This was he got an old book from like a collection that he'd found, and it was, teaching your kids your A's, your B's, your C's. So he's got two little nephews. I think one's 3 and one's 4. And And he took it down, and he went to his sister, and he's like, oh, I've got this book. So she's going through, and it's like, A is for apple, B is for blah, blah, blah. And he gets to, guess what G was?
No.
Hopefully a
Golly
giraffe.
Golly Wog. Golly mother effing Wog. Now, this is an education tool that was put out to kids in like the 70s or 80s. He didn't read this book. He was mortified. She was mortified. She was like, how could this be something? So if someone's allowed that to be in that book, because, but the thing is,
How old is this book?
sorry.
How old was it? When was it from?
It's from like the 70s or 80s or something. It's just like, but it's an old, just a normal big picture of and you see a Gollywood. Now, the thing that gets me is, it's like, it's easy for us to kind of condemn it because of what we see the world as today. But that's what the world was then. And again, it's not that it was right, but that's been allowed to be put into those books. And again, the term, we've in Jermaine and Elsie, one of Ashley's short films that we made, nigger brown. It was a common term, nigger brown. It was something that everybody used. And it's not because it was right, but it was something that society has been told, oh, it's okay to use that, because no one...
I think it's one thing as well, it being put into the books, but still using those books, and those books still being out.
Oh, no,
there.
sorry. In defense of my friend, he wasn't using the book. Basically, he found a load of old books. One of them was a kid's thing. He looked at it. So he took it, and it was his sister who was going through it with him. And then they got to it, and she was mortified and took it off the kid. Do you see what I mean? She was off the fact that it could be allowed to be in a kid's book.
Even on that, Leon, I've got mates now, and one friend who set up a really incredible Instagram page. She's an early stage primary school teacher, and she is the mother of 3 children, and they're mixed race. Their dad is black and she's white, and she has a page, and basically all she posts is children's books that are multicultural, that show kids with hijabs, black kids, white kids playing with black kids, mixed race families, African stories, whatever it is. But there has to be an active choice made for...
I've got kids. I've got 2 boys.
Yeah.
So I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, both boys, and we live in Lincoln, which is very white. It's disturbing. It's so white. And they go to a private school as well. However, the good thing about the private school is it is very multicultural, because there are lots of people from abroad. There are lots of people from the RAF, because it's Lincoln. And he's got a little girl, an Indian little girl there, and there's a few kind of, and I'm really sorry, because I'm very ignorant, and I don't know what the best. Do you prefer us to say black children, or do you prefer us to say just children? I really don't know, and I'm embarrassed.
Isn't it? It's fine to say, the whole thing of I don't see colour isn't really a thing. It's like, see colour, there's nothing wrong in it. It's beautiful. I'm brown, it's like, there's nothing wrong in kind of...
And I think as a white person, you go, I do anyway, I don't want to say the wrong thing. But what I've noticed with my 4-year-old, he's never once ever said to me, she's called Dania, but he calls her Danduna, because that's what she likes to be called. Why is Danduna a different colour to me? He's never said it, ever, ever, ever. And he's surrounded by a lot of white. And I think it must start really on from the parents. Now, my parents are racist. I bless them. They're not horribly 1970s, 1980s racist. But, I've heard them saying, well, white lives matter too. And I'm like, Mum, it's not about that. It's not about that. That's like when someone hits you and then they start crying because they've had a bad childhood, but they've just hit you. I was like, we need to listen, because that's the only way this is ever going to change. And actually, it's all right going, oh, well, we don't do that anymore. We don't say those words anymore, but we still do those little, huge, hurtful things like pulling our bag to one side. And actually had that conversation because after I'd read your post and I saw that a black guy, and I purposely let my phone swing out around me, and I might as well have gone, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so happy to see him. I really wanted him to know that I loved him and I was giving him love, so I gave him the biggest smile I could possibly do. And he looked at me really confused and then gave me a big smile back, and I was just, hello, and he was like, hello, and then just carried on.
I think that's a really
I've never
interesting.
seen that again.
I think that's a really interesting thing there, because there are some black people who are thugs, and so I think that for me anyway, what I keep thinking about is how we change the stereotype and how we need to start from the bottom. And when I say the bottom, I mean from very young, really early. And so where we're talking about those storybooks, that's why I think it is really important. We have to make a conscious choice to educate our kids in that way. When I was young, there were no books with kids of colour in them. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, and I see my mates now and their kids have black dolls and stuff. I remember mum trying really hard to get one. I can't remember whether I ever did, but I don't think I did. It's amazing that your kids are in school where there's multicultural families, but those that aren't, you know, one of my family members, their kids are at a school where it's very mixed, but there aren't many Chinese people or people from that part of the world. And so when one of the kids saw a Chinese person, that's when he asked the question, oh, he understands the black kid, he understands the Asian kid, he doesn't understand the Chinese kid because he's not around that. And so what am I trying to say? You know, so they ask the questions when they see the difference.
But I think, sorry, to that point is
not around, you know?
My thing with it is, it's that, yeah, it's down to the parents, it's down to all of us to educate us, but the resource needs to be there. And the fact that the resource wasn't there, and the fact that the resource that was there did have gollywogging, somebody on a high level has allowed that to happen. And that's what we need to make sure that we don't get too caught up in the fact of the whole divide and conquer, which is what I feel like the people of above want. Whereas if the people who are making these decisions, that's why it's like, I understand what you mean, like starting from the bottom, making sure we educate from the bottom up, but actually we need to make sure that we've got the people at the top giving the opportunities to allow that. So these books have to be created, and yet there are people doing it, but there are, you know, it's the big campaign that not I've got, but that's going on at the moment, is to get people in entertainment and in media on high level positions of colour, which I hate that term now. I used to always say it, and I've realised I actually hate it. But black people, you know, people from different ethnicities, because by doing that, what you do is you'll notice it. It's like you'll notice it if someone's brought a book to you and you go, oh, there's no diversity in this book. But somebody who isn't experienced of that will not see it. And that's not an excuse. Ignorance isn't an excuse. But unless you've got somebody next to you who's got equal standing, and it doesn't mean, and I hate this whole thing of, oh, we're just giving people a job because of the colour of the skin. No, there are plenty of people who are able and capable to do these jobs. So now we need to find the visibility of it. And I've got a problem at the minute where I've been putting this list together of black creatives and people who are of African descent, who for behind the camera, and all of the groups that I'm trying to find and join, the closed groups because it's a safe space. No, we don't need a safe space. We don't need it to be closed. What we need it to be is open and inclusive. So yeah, it might just be black people or people of African descent in the groups, but don't close it, because if you close it, the people on the outside can't see in, and that's another excuse to go, there's a barrier there, so we can't. We need to make sure that there's visibility across the spectrum with everything.
But Adrian, like going back all of the years that you've been in the industry, how many I would imagine that you've been lots of times the only mixed race person in productions, no black choreographers, black directors, black writer. What's your experience been on that?
Yeah, it's been exactly that. I think things are changing now, and I do think it's probably slightly different for plays, but the shows that I do and that I went into was very much not that at all. And I've had really amazing experiences, but when you do get cast in a show that isn't necessarily for a black person, they've just opened up the role, and whoever gets it, gets it. And that happened to me in Starlight Express, actually, when I auditioned for that, and it was for Rustin. I think the last black Rust they had was probably 20 years before me. And I remember getting that role, and I was so pleased that I got it, just because I just really wanted to do that part and I really wanted to do the show. But then all I heard afterwards was like, oh, yeah, of course. I mean, you know, he only got it because they just wanted a Black Rusty this year. And it was like, no, it isn't. That wasn't the case at all. You know, I know that for a fact. But when you're happy about getting something and then you get bashed down straight away, that's like really, really hurtful. But I've worked with, I mean, I've done black shows, and there've been Simon Callow was the director, amazing. White, Trevor Nunn, amazing. White, there were the black shows I did. And then all the other shows I've worked with 2 out of maybe 18 professional extended productions. 2, one was Clark Peters last year, and Tyrone Huntley, who's just gone into directing, and that was it.
If you think but that's everywhere. So if you think that we're sort of like talking about our industry, but that is just everywhere. And I've been
Probably an industry that would believe itself to be quite forward thinking as well in that respect.
And in terms of like area, like Sarah Jane's talking about Lincoln. I know Adrian was the countryside, literally Stoke Poges. Jen's Surrey, Donna York, Leon Liverpool, me Notting Hill. It's gonna differ, the experience for all of us.
Yeah.
Donna, what was it like where you were, like growing up in terms of black people?
So I was brought up in Yorkshire, in York, and I tell you something now, there was no black people. I think the first time that I had a moment with a black person, I will never forget it because it was probably the most glorious time of my life. It was New Year's Eve, and I had a glorious kiss with this beautiful gentleman. And it was in a club called The Gallery and it was a Sunday night, and it was R&B night. And I don't know where these black people came from. They were just in the gallery on a Sunday night. In the streets, in the days, no one. It was just white people. And I was like, where are these black people living? Where are they? I want to see them. You know what I mean? So yeah, Yorkshire is getting better now. There was quite a bit of diversity there, but yeah, there was no diversity at all growing up. And for me, like I've when I first saw like kind of like black people, I was just like, oh my God. It was amazing because I'm can I say this? I really like, I'm quite obsessed with black skin. Can I say that? I think it's so incredibly beautiful. And
What sort of age
so-
are you at this point, Donna?
sorry, Coco Shell, say that again.
What sort of age are you at this point?
Oh, I think I must have been about 18, maybe. Can I say 16? I think I had a fake ID. Maybe I was 16, yeah.
That's interesting. So what was your experience? So before you'd seen a black person in the flesh, that sounds really weird.
No, they exist, right?
Yeah,
They're
it's weird, yeah.
When was the first memory that you have of knowing that there were black people then? And what was it from?
Maybe it was from school that we got taught a little tiny bit about slavery. Tiny bit. But that's pretty much it.
And then after that,
and yeah, I never and yeah, and then it's just going back on the gollywog there, Leon. I haven't been back to York in a couple of years, so maybe it doesn't exist anymore. But there is a street called the Shambles, and there's kind of little quirky shops in there. And I shit you not, there is a shop full of gollywogs.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. I went back a couple of years ago and I was like, what? This is madness. Why is this okay? Why? It's just utterly shocking,
And actually,
you know?
because I know, because I'm always in antique shops because I'm doing up an old house, and you often see those dolls, and they are quite pricey as well. And when you were talking about that, I was remembering when I was little, and I think it was Robinson's marmalade. It was some marmalade, and that had. I don't feel like I have the right to say that word. So it had that doll on there, and if you collected so many labels, then you got a badge with that on. And I don't know why. And I don't know why. You know, like with the statues, I'm like, when those statues would fall down, I was like, how are they still up? And how are they still up when we know what we know? And why are those things not burned? What do they matter? Maybe keep one just to go, wasn't this awful? This was a terrible thing that we did. And we were still doing it in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, and actually still in 2020 as well. And isn't it time that we went, get rid of those? That's it. That's offensive. Full stop. Let's just get rid of it.
But also, can I just add, I'm sorry, going back on the like Gollywog pins, like just the first band in the works. I do remember that because my mum collected those stamps. You know, it was something that a very long time ago, but it was something where you collected X amount of tokens, and then you got like a different version of whatever the doll was, and we had those, and that's just crazy, isn't it? But and like what we did,
yeah. So
Sorry?
Adrian's mum.
And so is your mum black or white?
White.
Okay.
I mean,
But what do we say to people who say, well, it's just a doll? Oh, it's just a doll. What do we say to those people? That's
What it represents. It's what it represents. Like
I think it's different. I do think it's, I think people are very more so aware of what that is, and obviously, but it fell in the category of, there's also a bank, that was Midlands Bank, where if you open their bank account, you'd get like the money box. If you collected tokens, you'd get different pigs for the money box. If you collected the Robinson's jam, you would get 5 different badges of that. It was kind of, we went to McDonald's Happy Meal, you got a free toy. It was that kind of thing. Obviously now, and not even just now, but even like years before, that would like never happen. But it was almost like an unconscious thing that,
just another thing.
If I find these, I'll get a free that. Yeah, I'll do that. It's a free, and it was never really a, obviously now it's mortifying, but I run in the works. My family did collect those. I mean, how crazy is that?
Well, I think I can sort of understand that. Like you said, it was just a thing you did and a thing you collected. And if you don't understand the history behind it, then for you, it's just another thing that you collect. I think that's why, I'm so big on the education thing, because somehow we know what swastikas are. And if you were collecting, different sizes or colours of swastikas, then you probably wouldn't, because you kind of understand the history behind it. Even if you don't really know why it's bad, you kind of do. So maybe that wouldn't have been another thing that you would have collected. And so that's why I'm saying, like, in our schools, if we're learning a bit more about that, then we
also
understand where they come from and why that maybe isn't a good thing to collect.
Also, these companies, let's not forget, because again, it's like we have to put the onus on ourselves to educate ourselves, but we also have to put a lot of onus on these massive companies who have got massive media departments, who have got massive researchers, who look into whenever someone picks a symbol, they're not just picking a symbol, they're looking at what goes behind it. So someone's allowed that to be on that jam jar, knowing what the connotations of it are. Do you see what I mean? So it's a case of like it's great. Me and Ashley work with an actress, a trans actress, Monroe Bergdorf, mixed race girl. And she was hired by L'Oreal. Don't know if a lot of people know the story. And then she spoke out about racism. And I always kick myself now, like at the time, she's a lot younger than me. And I'm 40 years old, been in the industry for a while. And I see myself in not a similar position as trans, but as in a mixed race person in entertainment. And I was like, just kind of, hold back a little bit. Don't go, you grow in your career. And it was one of those things. And, I posted publicly to say, look, I apologize for, questioning the way you approach that, but now that company have taken her on as a diversity advisor, which again, I think, and good for her for taking it, because she can make a difference. But that company reaching out an olive branch, but if it wasn't for all the stuff that had gone on, they wouldn't have done that. But I think it's a case of these companies, without actually having an experience of what happened to Monroe, should be doing the same thing. And ignorance, again, is not an excuse. It's not an excuse for us as the general public, but it's less of an excuse for a massive corporation who are using these images, which they know are attached to all these negativity, not just about black people, about anything. Do you know what I mean? It's like
you've got Liam, actually, you're not on your own, just because it's this toe the line narrative, isn't it, that we've got? It's like don't do it, like about other black people, like when they're getting, I've done it, when you see other black people getting a bit too excited, you're like, oh come on, hold it down, don't get
pull it back.
Yeah, they're showing us all up. It's that narrative in your head that we've now got to throw out of the window. And actually, what you said, Leon, last night when we were chatting about this is, you know, we're a bit scared to say something too risky, just so in
You
case
get sacked.
it dies down. And it's like, you're the person that said that. How do we keep this going in a way that's healthy, that's not vitriolic, that's not divisive, and actually just keep it an open conversation? And Sarah Jane, you being a mum, you know, the brilliant thing of you being able to do this with your children, you know, Adrian, the fact that you were the only black boy, mixed race child in your village, you know what I mean? That was actually
The first person, I remember the first kind of like interaction, like friend I had was when I went to Studio Centre, and I started college in London at 16. But from 4 right up until 16, there was no black kids in my schools, no black kids in my village whatsoever. And the only other person I kind of had a slight interaction with was when I used to go to auditions as a kid, and that was you, Ashley. And the reason why I was really drawn to Ashley when I was like 10, 11 was because I remember walking in a room for audition as a kid and seeing someone that looked just like me, and I couldn't believe that someone looked so much like me. And it started off just being like, hi. And then I see you again at another audition. It was like, oh, hi, how are you? And then we kind of got a sort of friendship, but I didn't know him. I didn't have his number. Like we weren't, I just always used to see this guy at the auditions, and he looked so much like me. And I almost used to get excited if I hadn't got cast anything, and I'm going to see Ashley, you know, who looks like me. And then I'd go back home, and then there was no one like me at all.
And that was at 12. That's
like 11.
That's a long time. 11. That's a long time to go through. And Jen, that would have been similar for you, right, as well in Surrey.
Yeah, it was quite similar. And the kind of sad thing about it is that sometimes I thank my lucky stars that I grew up around all these white privileged people, and therefore I'm quite privileged and sort of have quite a middle class black upbringing, I would say, which means that I didn't really fall into any of those stereotypes of becoming that child who would have been in trouble or whatever it might have been. The problem is obviously people that don't know me don't know my background, so I would obviously still get tarred with those stereotypes as just being a black person who could easily be the thuggish girl or whatever it is.
And that's
I feel exactly the same because I had that same upbringing, and you know, had like elocution lessons, and I just felt like I was definitely privileged from where I was born and grew up. It wasn't until, like, for instance, just a really small example, like I would call someone on the phone to book something, or maybe to book accommodation or a hotel or digs, for instance, and I'd be on the phone and they're like, oh, really looking forward to seeing Miss Hansel, marvellous, can't wait to meet you all, can't wait to see the place. This is a true story. And then turning up and then, yes, can I help you? Oh yeah, hi, speak to you earlier, I'm just coming here. No, sorry, what are you doing here? Oh, sorry, I'm Adrian, nice to meet you, I speak to you. Oh, sorry, oh, you're Adrian. And I was like, yeah. They're like, oh, sorry, I just wasn't expecting you to. Oh, you just didn't sound. Oh, okay. Oh, I think I'm in. And straight away, it's awkward, and I feel like, oh, should I? And then they're just like, you just don't sound like, you know, you just don't sound how I.
But the brilliant
and
thing.
It's like so especially if you get a tour and you're booking like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 digs, and you turn up, I can guarantee you probably, you know, every 6 out of like the 10 you've booked, they'll be like, oh, I suppose I wasn't expecting you. I think
tragic.
I don't mean to laugh, but this is.
You laugh because it's just, you should have laughed.
But Abe,
they expect a certain accent. They expect, like, you know, oh, you don't.
But you know what, Aid? Then they have a glorious time with you. You've lived in their house for however long, and they haven't been robbed. They haven't been raped in the night or stabbed in the night. Do you know what I mean? All of these things.
And that in itself is changing the stereotype, which that has to be your experience to do that.
I got called a nigger the first time I ever got called a nigger, because for me, I was in Notting Hill. It was really multiracial. My nan was white, so I've got loads of white cousins. My mum's mixed raced, so it's not. I haven't entirely got the mixed race experience, but I go to Liverpool to see all of my cousins, and I'd be the only black boy in the middle of all my white cousins and not think anything of it. My thing was, I get what you're saying about, and me and Leon, Leon's from Toxteth, Liverpool, very multiracial. And I get what you're saying about being in that background where you live in a village or you live in an area where you're surrounded by, and you are the only person. But what was hurtful to me, and it must have been even more of a shock to you, because I lived in Notting Hill where you brought down Portobello and it was like black, white, everybody was like when I'd come into the living room to my stepdad and he'd have like, there'd be white, black, mixed race, everybody in our living room. It was a real, so for me, when I was in Sunderland doing Panto with Ant and Dec, and I remember walking to the shop. Yeah, good one, because not many people can say this. And I remember I was getting packy late at night, and I was like, they've got it wrong.
Just like to add, I've had that. Ridiculous.
Packy. And then I got closer and they went, oh, no, it's nigger. Right, and I was like...
It should have
You
been like,
gotta laugh. But it was actually then. So mental health wise, what I'm trying to say is, if you are susceptible to mental health issues, if you're vulnerable, if you're not working, and you've come from this background and you think, I'm this really upstanding person, I've gone to a school that's this, and then you're getting treated like all the other niggers. Do you know what I mean? It's that type of thing that can impact on mental health.
just shouldn't happen. I remember going on tour with a really good friend of mine who is a black guy, and we were in Wales, and people looked at him like he was an alien, and I wanted to go and smash. I'm 4'11" before I tell this story. I wanted to go and smash their faces in, and he was like, it's fine, don't worry about it. But it's not fine, guys. It's really not.
It's not fun, but that's the lived experience, isn't it? And I think in our country, like what Ashley just said about me, I'm from Toxteth. It's a very multicultural area. It's like everybody, it's the same. Everybody is everything. Funny story, my mum, we went to a christening recently, and she was like, my mum is white, blonde, 4 foot nothing. She was like, all the food was out. It was sandwiches and this, that, and the other. And she was like, do they not know that we're Jamaican? It's like, Mum, you're not, love. She thinks she literally is. Oh, you come to so for me growing up, like everybody was. I have always seen myself as black. Like everybody in Liverpool is all different shades. So for me, being black wasn't about how light or dark you were. It was just what you were. It's like you can never deny it. It's like my features are black. It's like my hair's black. I'm always been proud of it. And then I was saying to Ashley in another conversation, I remember the first time. Well, one of the first times I fully realised that there was a difference was I came down to London, and I'd gone to a family wedding, and everybody was West Indian on that side, but dark skin black. And me and my brother, who's lighter than me, and he was like, but being black, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, you're not black. We're like, yeah, but they're black. No, you're not black. You're half or you're mixed. And I was like, I'm fucking black. Like, what the hell? It's like what I've always done. And it was a real time. I had to come to terms with the fact that actually there is different scales. And then also growing up and having different people, friends and also relationships of like going out with black guys who are darker skinned and their experience. Now, again, I'm not taking away from the fact that there's difficulties growing up in England as a mixed race person. But I think the thing for me is because my features are black and I'm unmistakably black, it's always like, it's when you come into contact with police or non-black people in Liverpool generally, you're a nigger, you're a black bastard, you're this, you're that. And so you wins. But the thing is, the fact that we're so hardened to it, it's not anything. It rolls off the tongue because it's a case of, it doesn't make it that it's right, but also I don't feel I should be offended by it. If anything, I should be making people aware of it. So if they feel offended by it, then don't do it, you know what I mean? And that'll be taught on to other people. But it's like we all have different privileges. Like Jen, you said you've got a privilege growing up where you did. Adrian, you've got your privileges. Ladies, you have your privileges from being white. And it's okay. And Ashley, you have your privilege just being Ashley Campbell because he's fabulous. But it's having an understanding of, what, in life, different people have got different struggles. Do you know what I mean? I've gone off on a tangent here, but
no, that makes sense. that
Yeah.
feels really close to my heart, because what I've found is that for me, the conversations I need to be having after this sort of massive worldwide conversation is how this affects me, and my sort of immediate bubble, as it were. And I don't have children, but my partner's white, and eventually my children will be mixed race. And so for me, it's quite a big deal to understand that I and my partner will be completely different actual colour, probably, to our children. And it's interesting to hear you say that, Leon, because I probably won't call my children black, because I feel like, well, you are mixed race, and to call you black is to deny your white side. This is me saying this as not a
But
mixed.
this is the thing. This is the thing, because I have thought that, and I do think that, and it wasn't until I think Ashley years and years ago said, because I think that, because I'm really close to my mum. She is white, so if I was to call myself black, I just feel like then I'm not discussing what my mum is. I have a white mum, I have a black dad, so I am mixed race.
Yeah.
I love my white side, I love my black side. It wasn't until Ashley said once, well, if you got knocked over by a bus, they'd be like, oh, there's a 30-something black guy that's been hit.
Absolutely.
And I was
And
like,
that's the problem for
yeah,
me.
you're right.
Everybody
Bit
else
dark,
is
Ashley.
no,
but yeah,
Society will see them as black. That is what society will see them as. That's, no matter how much I try and educate my kids that they are from black and white, is what I think. And I think that's what you're saying, Adrian. I'd love to know more
what
about
we need to, and actually what we need to, sorry to get deep, but it's so complex. The mixed race experience is so complex, because even when my nan died and we all went to the funeral, and oh god, it was comedy. And basically, so my nan's white, red, ginger hair, and the priest could not make it out. He was still because he's got my nan had a daughter from her first relationship. So my auntie is white, my auntie Maria, who's I don't see as my half auntie, I see as my full. I love my auntie, but all of this, it's so complex, and it's because people just don't get it. The amount of times that Adrian or Leon or would have gone in situations and people meet their mums and they go, oh, and it's like,
Oh, all the time.
what?
Oh my god, even all the time.
And it's such a, and I think it's so.
It's that comment where they go, "Oh my god, you've got the same smile." It's like
This is the thing, and my mum is like, you can't really place. Leon and Jen and Adrian have met my mum, but I remember her experience. It's like she would get spoken to in Arabic. All of these different weird, and it's such a. So how do we get so visible and get the conversation going so much that that Sarah Jane's kids aren't going to grow up having these sort of same conversations? And I feel that's why this is important today, really, for us to sort of just start to. I mean, it's a minefield, isn't it?
And I think particularly being in the industry we're in, and from Leon's very first point about it being, about what we're fed on our screens, I'm massive on that. And I think another amazing topic for one of these sessions is actually colorism.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I don't even know what that is.
And for me, that is.
Yeah, do you want to explain what colorism is to Sarah Jane?
Well, just the sort of discrimination depending on your shade of black.
Yeah, and it
also,
comes from both sides.
I think it's such a massive tangent in a way that it should be kept maybe for another session.
Going back to your point, Jen, about your kids, I think if your child, because also it's fine what you call your child, but it's what, my mum never called me black. She was she never called me white, she never called me anything. She just called me Leon, and she loved me.
Yeah.
So it's fine what you want to describe them as, but ultimately it's what they want to describe themselves as. And for me, identifying as black, even though I do say mixed race now, but generally if I identify as black, doesn't mean that I haven't got the background, my mum's background, and doesn't mean that I'm denying my mum. It's like, right. I'm talking about because also the name, the label black or mixed race is not about culture. I am fully accepting of my white culture. I'm fully accepting of my black culture. That is not, why is that tied to the name of what I call myself as the outside appearance? And I think it's what you've just said. Then if we go back to the roots of it all and we get more inclusivity in on-screen representation, but even more so than that, behind the camera representation, so that the stories that are being told, it's like I was telling Ashley, a lot of my short films that I make myself, I write the stories because it's like this person in a relationship with this person, or this person's done that. And then I cast, usually from my friends who are very talented. And it'll be like, oh, Ashley, do you want to play this part? Or it could be, Jen, do you want to play that part? Most of the time, if it's something of mine, it's never been written with color in mind. Not because I don't see color, because actually the most important thing is the story. But then as soon as you put it on a public platform, the comments that come in of, oh, the way the black guy reacted in da-da-da-da-da, or a white guy, blah, 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 or the Muslim lad shouldn't have, blah, blah, blah. It's like, hang on a minute. The names are in the show and they're on the credits. But the fact that you're using the color of their skin or their ethnicity to describe what you say means that you're putting an instant judgment on them because of that. Whereas if you've got people who are creating these stories who are of all different ethnicities, when they're writing these stories and when they're casting these stories, it won't be so heavily ingrained. So when people are watching it, eventually, as generations go down the line, they'll just see everything. It'll be like an episode of Pingu. Do you know what I mean? There'll be all these green, blue, different shades of life. And I think that's where society needs to get to, which I'm not being defeatist. It's not going to happen in our generation. It mightn't happen in the generation after. But if all these steps are taken and we can make sure they're implemented, then I think it will happen for future generations down the line.
And it's about, it's so difficult because you sort of go, do we, like, part of me's loved the not big dealness of growing up and things just not being a big deal. And now, and I went, oh, it's because I feel awkward. I'm the person who'll cross the street first to sort of like not make a white lady feel uncomfortable.
Same.
Yeah,
Same.
all of that. Cross the road first to not make a white person, sort of like hold it down a little bit. All of those things. It's like, how do we just brave it out? And the great thing now, we've got Afua Hirsch, and Akala, and these really amazing activists who talk in a way that I could never talk about it. And actually, you can't argue with them. And that's the thing. It's not just because I think we can generalise so much, and I feel a lot of, just going back to the mixed race thing. Also, Jen earlier saying, black people are thugs, but white people are thugs. Chinese people are thugs. There are thugs in every. But there seems to be.
But the thing with that is that there are every different race of thugs, but the thugs that we see generally 9 out of 10 will be hoodie black guys in the street. That's what we see more so than a gang of thugs.
I see plenty of white thugs in the same guys. No,
I'm talking about TV and films.
Yeah. And also the thing is, something that I think that really hits on the fact is for example, us as black people, people of color, and I bet you've all had it. Oh, you're not a typical black person. Oh, I don't mean you, because you're not like black people. What are black people
always
like?
Loads.
Why can't a black person have a Liverpool accent? Why can't a black person be well spoken? Because there's plenty that they are. You're only assuming that black people aren't like that because you're told that from the television.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And also, what we've also got to look at as well, I think, now, it's being the special black as actually it's so unhealthy. Like being in I remember back in the day, being in a nightclub and a white girl, can I feel your hair? And you go, oh, and you have a little rummage in your hair, and you feel a bit special, and then you sort of go, all of this shit, Also, like white women, white men, fetishizing black people, mixed race people, in a way that they get that black thing, and when that black thing then materializes into a child, and then they've got the child, and it's like, and then sometimes when the relationship goes wrong, they're like, oh, that was an awful thing, and we're now going to go into our bubble, and it's going to be, and then it's so complex because we've now got to actually just go, get this all out in the open. Let's speak about these things, sort of like not make it these to. There's a great documentary at the moment called "The School That Tried to Stop Racism," and I actually teach one of the kids, Henry. It's amazing. The black kids all put into one room. They are talk about race. They're having these really buoyant, effervescent conversations. The white kids stuck in the room. They don't want to talk about it. They feel awkward. They feel like say the wrong thing. They've also never had to talk about it. Why are you making me talk about it now? And what we need to do is have more conversations like this where actually not be scared to ask. You know, I've got a friend he says, you know, why is it weird to say half caste? Now, she's an educated woman. She's educated. Like, she know, you know who it is, Lee. And I really love her if she watches this. Bless her. But I do. But she was in my living room and we had it out. We had it out. And
Get her on! Get her on!
She's
At the same time, it's not, but, you know, good for her for saying, what's it? You know,
Yeah.
as shocking as it is, like, at least she asked you. And
But that's the same thing as me going to you guys who are mixed race and trying to understand, you know.
It is hard to understand because you literally, until you wrote that beautiful piece, I never questioned myself. I thought I was a good girl. Turns out I'm a fucker. So
What does it make you a fucker? Because you've got something ingrained in you that you've because of education and whatever's gone wrong doesn't make you a bad person. And also, I've had racial thoughts. I've said stuff that's microaggressions to people of other races, microaggressions to other genders. Do you know what I mean? It's like to a woman, oh, do you want me to carry your bag for you? It's silly things like that. You think of nothing of it, and someone goes, well, actually, you're trying to take away. We all do it, but there's nothing wrong in doing it. What's wrong is learning that it was wrong and keep repeating it.
And actually, it's
again, I'd rather get robbed. I'm never going to repeat that again. I'm never going to make another human being like that again, ever. I mean,
I've got it. Like at the moment, I mean, it was all right when people were confusing me with Brazilian and all that. Oh, I loved it. But now I'm getting hara hara hara, and I'm getting all the people thinking I'm like Ethiopian and Somalian. I've been getting offended by it.
But what is that? That's a different conversation in itself, because
That's a
what's
different
the stereotype there with the Somalians that you don't want to be associated with?
What is it? And I'm fixing it.
Brazilians you're all happy with, like,
And it's going back to my mum,
Deep.
who I love, but she works in a school and she works with, God, this is awful to say this, but loads of Somalian children, and she said that it had been problematic. And in her saying that, years ago she said it, I then built up a bit, and there'd been this thing around, that there seems to have been a safe space for us to be, this is another conversation, but Islamophobic, all of these different things. So why am I now offended while people are going to Assalamu alaikum? I get offended by it. I don't now, but I have been. And it's about us fixing all of these things. And can we do this chat again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like it's really good for the soul.
yeah.
I think they've given us past the 40 minutes on Zoom. For everybody out there, I'm a cheapskate. I didn't pay for the extra 40 minutes. But so I think we've probably gone on for a long time. It's been
I'm
good.
going to say a massive thank you, and just to hear everybody's different experiences. We can't cover it. I think we should do it again.
Yeah,
We're going to
that's
have to go through and pick out, the next topic. There's so many where it could easily go on a tangent, but
Yeah, and pick out the next topic.
time of the day.
Everybody, thank you so much.
And Adrian, I'm
Thank you, everyone.
have a chat about this experience of yours.
please. I'd love that.
Exactly. And Donna, thank you. We haven't even scratched the surface with Donna. Sarah Jane, so grateful. And thank you for your honesty, because it's big to put your head above the parapet to say
always-
these things.
That's why I keep getting sacked.
And also, but I remember I've always seen you, like when I've seen you in the papers and stuff for different things, and I've gone like, oh, she's really honest. And when you are, it's it's like Leon as well. I feel bad to Leon when we were at the RSC and he'd be kicking off about stuff, and I'd be going, come on, have a conversation.
Boy.
And go, come on, mate, you are building this stuff, and it's actually to build this. Be free. Let's talk, Adrian. Thank you. To think that we've known each other since we were 12, and I didn't actually know that experience. I just know that we've been best
Ask who got the job out of you two.
It varies.
I'm so that's beautiful that was an experience, and that you could go back to Stoke Poges, Stoke Poges, and go, actually, there are other people out there like me. Okay,
Yeah.
let's do it again. This is called Question It, by the way. So
Question it.
Cool.
Let's. I love
Yeah.
it.
Question.
thanks so much, everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
all.
Thank you, guys. Have a glorious day.
I love you guys. Bye.
See you in a minute.